And there were no survivors.
Wow, none?
Not a one.
Well, now we have a special treat for you folks, don't we, Andy?
That's right, Tom. Reporter Hazel McCormick, our environmental specialist, will give you the details. Hazel?
Right here, Andy. Today we're going to take a look a little closer to home.
An in-depth look at the dangers of houseplants?
That's next week, Tom.
Today we'll be looking at the dangers of dumping poisonous waste into the Hudson River, and I spoke with a few specialists to see what they had to say on the matter.
Yep.
I spoke with local fishermen and Mr. Wilkins about the history of the Hudson River. So tell me, sir, what makes you a specialist on this mighty river?
Well, listen here, missy. I've been fishing at this here fishing spot since before you were born.
Fishing? On the Hudson River?
That's right, you young whippersnapper.
Okay. So tell us a little background info on the Hudson.
Well, let's see here. My family's had a little something to do with this river since it was first discovered.
Oh, are you a relative of Henry Hudson?
No, but I am the great-great-great-great-grandson of Hudson's fine deck swabber, Charles H. Wilkins.
I see. Well, if you could continue.
Right, well, Henry Hudson first sailed the river in 1609 when he was looking for a western route for the Dutch to India.
Fascinating. What other history of the river do you know?
Well, in 1807, the very first steamboat invented by John Stevens and Robert Fulton sailed these fine waters, don't you know? My grandfather, Leonard Q. Wilkins, was aboard that voyage. He thought himself quite the pioneer.
And indeed he was. The first steamboat. No doubt that made the river quite the popular spot.
Oh, completely. With all the attention that this here river was getting, the cities of Troy and Albany became America's trade powerhouse. That's why they call New York State the Empire State, don't you know? Things only went uphill from there. In 1825, the Erie Canal was built, branching Albany to Buffalo, and New York's economy soared. Because now everywhere in New York was successful by the ocean's exotic trade, and all the ocean's tourists too.
Tourists?
You heard me right, tourists. The river was a natural hotspot back in those days, attracting folks from all over the world. The nature was so beautiful that a natural art school opened up called the Hudson River School of Art. They had a flair for naming back then.
If it was so beautiful, what happened?
Oh, I know that story too. You see, towards the end of the 19th century, the people of the Hudson Valley were focused on becoming all industrialized and whatnot. So, as a result, a high degree of urbanization began to occur.
You mean urbanization?
Yeah, that. Because of them big cities, a lot of pollutants had begun to enter these here waters. And mind you, back in those days, there weren't no legislations to limit the pollution.
How'd we ever get out of a nosedive like that?
Well, in the late 1900s, a couple of the boys and I got together and told the big bad government our woes. And since things have been a-changing for the better around these parts.
Really? You did that?
Yep, and don't let anybody tell you any different.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you, Mr. Wilkins.
My pleasure.
Now I know there is a poison in the Hudson River, but what are the effects of that poison? I asked a specialist. Hello, Professor Jaffa Cake?
It's Jaffa Cake. So I hear you want to learn about the pollutants in the Hudson River.
Yes. What have the effects been on the organisms in contact with these pollutants?
There have been many different effects on the organisms. Many, many, many. There were once giant sturgeons in the Hudson River, I have you know. They could knock over a boat. These fish could weigh up to 300 pounds.
What happened? Ready?
PCBs happened. With those chemicals in the water, the sturgeons have reduced in size to the point that you might not even recognize them as the same fish. Although, not all fish were affected by the PCBs in the same way.
What do you mean?
Well, the American shad became one of the most common fish in the Hudson River because the shad had begun to adapt to PCBs to the point where scientists didn't think that the fish could live without the PCBs. which is a big, big, big problem.
Oh my. So, how have these poisons affected the people of the Hudson Valley?
Well, well, well. The biggest poison in the river, when talking about people, are the PCBs and mercury.
Mercury? Like the planet Mercury?
No, no, no. This is a dangerous, poisonous element found in the bloodstream of people who eat the fish in the water, and drink the water of the Hudson River. It is even documented here, right here. Residents of the Hudson River Pier area often found to have an average of 2.2 nanometers per milliliter of mercury in their blood. Twice the amount recommended by Environmental Protectant Agency.
Uh-oh. Someone should tell old man Wilkins about this.
Now back to PCBs. If a pregnant woman were unfortunate enough to eat one of these fish from the Hudson River, it could cause numerous birth defects in their child. And it can often cause nervous, immune, and reproductive system damage to anybody.
Oh my. Well, thank you, Professor. Jaffa cakes?
Jaffa cake. But anything for a fellow environmentalist.
Before I concluded my research, I wanted to see what could be done about these pollutants in our legendary river. So I'm speaking with a Dr. Franklin P. Jones. Mr. Jones? So, what is being done to solve the pollution problems of the Hudson?
Well, one of the most guilty polluters, GE, has begun to dredge the Hudson to rid the waters of its PCBs.
GE?
Let me explain. GE has been dumping 1.3 million pounds of PCBs into the Hudson for the last 30 years or so. So the EPA has demanded that they clean up the mess they've made. Although, they only have plans to clean up 6 of the 200 miles they've contaminated.
That's terrible.
Yes. And unless someone speaks up, or should I say a whole lot of someone's, excuse the viewers, it'll never get clean.
How can we as inhabitants of the Hudson River Valley help save our natural wonder?
Well, you can write to your senator and tell him to bring this problem to Washington, D.C. because the Hudson River needs saving, and if GE won't do it on their own, then someone will just have to make them.
Well, you heard him, folks. Thank you, sir.
You're quite welcome. What are you doing there, Andy?
I'm writing to my senator about how the Hudson helped build our country, the damage that is being done to our river, and who must be held responsible.
That's a good idea, Andy. And you can